There are people who wait all year for their birthday, the balloons, the attention, the flood of wishes, the sweet chorus of validation that says, "You matter." And then, there are others. Those who quietly let the day pass, who brush off reminders, who tell everyone, it's just a normal day. But behind that calm, almost indifferent tone lies a fascinating psychology. Because when someone treats their birthday like it's nothing, it's rarely about nothing. It's about something deeply human. The quiet resistance behind not celebrating a birthday is more than an act of indifference, it's a subtle statement of autonomy. In a world that tells us to measure our joy by how loudly we celebrate, choosing stillness can be its own form of rebellion. For some people, treating their birthday like any other day is not about rejecting happiness but about redefining it. They resist the social script that says milestones must be marked by parties, attention, and performance. Instead, they quietly reclaim their day as something deeply personal, not a spectacle for others, but a moment for self-awareness. This quiet resistance is rooted in the desire to live authentically rather than conform to collective expectations. It reflects a mature understanding that joy does not always need to be performed or witnessed to be real. From childhood, we are conditioned to equate birthdays with validation. The gifts, the gatherings, the greetings all become signals that we are seen and loved. But as we grow older, many begin to sense the emptiness that sometimes hides behind the noise. Some people begin to crave simplicity, peace, and sincerity more than attention. They resist the pressure to participate in rituals that no longer resonate with their emotional truth. In that choice, there is quiet courage. It's the courage to say, "I don't need a reminder to feel valuable." It's the decision to step away from external approval and toward inner contentment. This quiet defiance is often misunderstood as sadness, introversion, or bitterness. But more often, it's a deeply grounded expression of self-possession. These individuals may see birthdays not as days for grand displays, but as mirrors reflecting their journeyed moments to take stock, to feel gratitude, or simply to rest. By not celebrating loudly, they create space for a more private form of meaning-making. Their resistance to celebration is not the absence of joy, but the presence of discernment. They understand that authenticity sometimes requires silence, that celebration does not have to be seen to be felt. In many ways, this quiet resistance challenges a culture that romanticizes constant excitement and external validation. It invites others to question whether they celebrate because they truly want to or because they fear what others might think if they don't. It asks us to consider that perhaps not every significant moment needs an audience, and that sometimes the truest form of celebration is the one that happens quietly within the self. The hidden psychology of emotional independence and self-containment in those who treat their birthday like a normal day is layered with complexity. Emotional independence is often misunderstood as detachment or coldness, but in truth, it is the ability to find emotional stability without constant external input. When someone doesn't feel the need to make their birthday a public affair, it often reflects a deep-seated comfort with who they are and a freedom from the need to be validated. They have learned to hold their sense of worth from within rather than outsourcing it to others. This form of independence is not a rejection of connection but a refined understanding of it, knowing that connection should enhance, not define, one's identity. For emotionally independent people, birthdays are not about external affirmation but about self-recognition. They may quietly acknowledge their growth, reflect on the past year, or simply carry on with their day in peace. To them, joy is not something that needs to be performed or proven. It is a private experience, a quiet knowing. This mindset often develops through a history of self-reliance, times when they learned to be their own source of comfort, encouragement, and validation. Over time, this becomes a form of emotional maturity, where they no longer depend on grand gestures to feel appreciated. They've built an inner ecosystem that sustains them, even when the world is silent. There is also a certain emotional economy at play. These individuals intuitively understand that expectations can lead to disappointment, and that the higher the anticipation of celebration, the sharper the sting when it falls short. So, rather than setting themselves up for emotional turbulence, they choose balance. They practice quiet gratitude instead of loud excitement, not because they lack feeling, but because they've mastered it. Their restraint is not about avoidance but about preserving emotional energy for what truly matters to them. In relationships, this self-containment can appear mysterious. Others might wonder why they don't seem eager to be celebrated, yet beneath that calm lies a sense of wholeness. They don't crave attention because they already feel seen by themselves. They don't need reminders of their worth because they carry it effortlessly. This kind of emotional independence reflects a grounded self-awareness, the ability to celebrate oneself inwardly without needing permission or participation. It's a quiet confidence that whispers rather than shouts, a contentment that asks for nothing because it already has everything it needs. The subtle tension between societal expectation and personal meaning becomes most visible when someone chooses not to celebrate their birthday in the traditional way. Society conditions us from an early age to believe that birthdays must be filled with joy, gatherings, and gratitude expressed through social display. We are taught that this one day is a measurement of how loved or valued we are by others. When someone breaks away from that narrative, it often triggers confusion or discomfort in others. The tension arises because their quiet choice contradicts a deeply ingrained social rhythm, the idea that happiness should be visible and shared. This act of nonconformity exposes how much of our celebration culture is rooted not in personal joy, but in collective performance. For many, choosing not to celebrate is not a rejection of happiness but an act of reclaiming authenticity. It's a conscious decision to detach meaning from the expectations of others and to redefine what the day represents. Instead of seeing the birthday as a stage for validation, they may view it as a moment of reflection, gratitude, or even neutrality. But society doesn't easily accept neutrality when it comes to emotions. There's an unspoken rule that milestones must be met with enthusiasm, and anything less is seen as sadness or apathy. This creates an invisible tension between the inner world of the individual and the outer demands of social convention. In this quiet rebellion, personal meaning becomes more sacred. By not participating in the expected rituals, a person often discovers a deeper connection to themselves. They begin to ask what celebration truly means when stripped of decoration, attention, and performance. This self-inquiry can reveal both freedom and loneliness, freedom from obligation, yet loneliness in being misunderstood. Others might misinterpret their silence as a sign of detachment, but in truth, it's a different form of engagement, one rooted in introspection rather than expression. The tension between expectation and meaning also reveals the fragility of social validation. When people expect a celebration, it is often less about honoring someone's life and more about fulfilling a collective ritual. When someone opts out, it unsettles that ritual, forcing others to confront their own motivations for celebrating. This dissonance challenges both sides to reconsider what it means to honor a person or a moment. Those who choose simplicity invite others to look beyond the cake and the candles and to recognize that meaning does not have to be shared to be real. Their quiet refusal to conform becomes a mirror that reflects how society equates joy with visibility and how true fulfillment often resides in what cannot be seen. The difference between seeking joy within versus seeking validation from others lies at the heart of why some people treat their birthday like a normal day. For many, a birthday is a stage where validation is performed and received through attention, gifts, messages, and celebration. These external gestures, while comforting, often serve as reminders of our dependence on others for emotional affirmation. In contrast, those who find contentment in simplicity do not dismiss joy, they simply locate it inwardly. They experience fulfillment that does not rely on recognition. Their quietness is not emptiness but fullness, a sign that they have cultivated an inner sense of worth strong enough to exist without applause. This shift from seeking validation to embodying self-contentment marks a profound psychological evolution, one rooted in emotional maturity and self-awareness. When people rely on external validation, their joy becomes fragile, easily shaped by the presence or absence of others. A forgotten message, a missed call, or a lack of enthusiasm can suddenly redefine how they feel about themselves. Those who seek joy within, however, are no longer hostage to these emotional fluctuations. Their happiness is not dependent on performance but on presence, being at peace with who they are, regardless of whether others remember to celebrate them. This independence does not mean isolation. Rather, it reflects a more balanced relationship with self and others. They can appreciate love and attention without needing it to confirm their worth. This inner orientation often arises from introspection and experience. People who have faced disappointment or emotional inconsistency from others learn that relying on external validation can lead to pain. Over time, they turn inward, learning to generate joy from self-acceptance, purpose, and quiet gratitude. Their birthdays may still carry meaning, but that meaning becomes private, almost sacred. Instead of celebration, they may prefer solitude or stillness, moments that allow them to feel grounded rather than displayed. This doesn't make them unfeeling, it makes them discerning about what kind of joy truly nourishes them. In a culture that glorifies visibility and constant affirmation, seeking joy within can seem countercultural. Yet it represents emotional strength, the ability to celebrate oneself without audience or approval. Those who embody this mindset remind us that joy is not measured by how many people notice it, but by how deeply it is felt. They find fulfillment not in being seen but in simply being, understanding that the truest celebrations are often silent, lived inwardly, and known only to the heart. How someone treats their birthday often reveals profound truths about their identity, boundaries, and emotional history. When a person chooses to let the day pass quietly, it's rarely an act of indifference. Instead, it reflects an intricate story of who they are, what they've experienced, and how they relate to themselves and others. Birthdays are symbolic, they mark time, growth, and belonging. But for some, the meaning of that day has shifted. It becomes less about celebration and more about introspection. Through their actions, they express how they view identity, not as something that needs to be performed or validated publicly, but as something deeply personal and self-defined. Their boundaries, too, are woven into this choice. By not participating in collective rituals of attention, they assert the right to decide what kind of emotional exposure feels authentic. This quiet boundary setting is a way of protecting their emotional space while preserving the integrity of what the day means to them. A person's relationship with their birthday can also reveal how their emotional history shapes their present. For someone who grew up feeling unseen or overlooked, birthdays may carry memories of disappointment or unmet expectations. Choosing not to celebrate can then become an act of emotional self-protection, a way of taking back control of what once brought pain. For others, it might represent healing, the moment when they no longer need grand gestures to feel significant. In either case, their behavior reflects an evolving emotional narrative, where boundaries are drawn not out of avoidance, but out of self-understanding. Identity and emotional boundaries often intersect in this quiet defiance of social norms. When a person decides that they no longer want to perform happiness for others, they are choosing authenticity over conformity. This doesn't mean they reject joy, rather, they are choosing to experience it on their own terms. The day becomes a mirror reflecting the kind of relationship they have with themselves, one that may prioritize peace over attention, reflection over performance, or meaning over expectation. Each uncelebrated birthday becomes a subtle declaration of independence from societal pressure and emotional dependency. This perspective reveals an important truth about human psychology. How we choose to mark or ignore certain moments says as much about us as what we choose to share. The quietness around a birthday can speak volumes about emotional resilience, personal growth, and the desire to define happiness internally. It shows that sometimes the deepest self-celebration happens not in the presence of others, but in the privacy of one's own acceptance.